Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Ball Fireman Racer Classic. Ball is a brand that's been in existence since the 1800s. It's a really interesting brand, and I think what a lot of people think of them, what I think of them, is about their use of tritium tubes, which makes them kind of stand out a little bit different from other brands, especially in this price range. We'll get onto those a little bit later, but the brand has kind of a higher price point than what we typically cover, really starting around $1,500. And for watches in that price range, this one being about $1,700, you have these kind of interesting vintage style dress watches that also utilize tritium tube technology. They're Swiss-made watches, sapphire crystals, use ETA movements, which they rebrand themselves. And they have a very kind of interesting design aesthetic that harkens to their rich history, railroads, and things of that nature. So this watch here, the Racer Classic, comes in a couple different varieties. We have this kind of smoky gray version. It has a very nice look, a gator strap. Like I said, it's Swiss-made and an automatic movement. So let's take a closer look. The case of the Ball Fireman Racer Classic has a very interesting and kind of elaborate design, as well as very nice finishing all around. It measures 42 millimeters in diameter, 51 millimeters lug to lug, about 11.5 millimeters tall, and actually features 21 millimeter lug width. So what's interesting about this case, and you can kind of see, is that it has like a more elaborate design than your average case does. You have these lugs that have this little bevel here, so they kind of look like they're welded on. And when you look at the profile, you can see just how dramatic it gets. So you have this top bezel, and then you have this kind of secondary bezel, which is actually concave, which makes it give off a really interesting reflection, something you don't typically see on a watch case. Then you have a very kind of thin central area. When you look at the lugs here too, you'll see how they have an interesting kind of like fluted or almost teardrop shape, I should say, with a squared tip and a squared bottom here. So it's already just like a lot of different geometry kind of coming together, and not necessarily fluidly. Like there's a kind of a almost a chunky architectural aesthetic to it, which I think is really nice. It speaks to the brand's heritage, trains, pocket watches, things like that. And then when you flip the watch over too, you have another concave area around here, then this beautiful and quite elaborate case back, which features this really deeply etched area with a very kind of nice little image of a train here. So really kind of high quality finishing there. And also on the lugs, you have brushing on the top, and then a beveling on this little edge here, and actually a touch more beveling here. So really a lot of details to look at, and they kind of give it a bit of a more of a dressy look to it. But then the size, 42 millimeters, is actually quite a robust case size. Other watches they do make watches that are around 40 millimeters, but this one is a little bit beefed up for I think to make it a little more masculine, a little bit more of a daily wear watch rather than just a dress watch. Coming up at 3, you have also a very sizable crown. It's 7 millimeters in diameter and 5 millimeters tall, and it is screwed down, so it is nice and secure there. This watch does have a 100-meter water resistance, so I imagine having the screw down there plays into that. And that's also just a very nice feature that this watch can get wet potentially. It's not something you have to take off if you're out being active, something like that. Yeah, so overall just extremely nice finishing on this watch, and a very interesting, and I think just a bit more elaborate case than you will typically see. The dial of the Ball Fireman Racer Classic has a definite vintage inspired look to it. The back color of this version, there is another version with a lighter dial, is a kind of like an ash smoky gray with a bit of a sunbursting to it. It's a really nice color, one I like a lot, that I think differentiates it a bit from a white dial or a light silver. It's a bit more, I think more masculine, but just also, I don't know, a little mysterious and dark. It's just a fun color to have on a dial. The primary index here, as you can see, consists of these kind of shark tooth shaped applied steel markers. They're very large. They stand off the dial very high, and they themselves have beveling, or they're kind of they're very three-dimensional. So they have reflections on either side. They kind of change with the light as you move them around. And they definitely give it a very vintage look. You also see within each marker is a tritium gas tube. And right now even you can see it. The fact that you can see them is actually they are constantly glowing because of how the tritium gas works. So it's not something that charges, it's just constantly giving off kind of a steady, even light. The darker it is, the more you can see it. Sometimes you can't see them at all, but right now they're definitely pronounced. Around that, on the very outer edge of this dial, is just a simple index of white lines. Those give you just a little bit more precision for minutes, a little bit more legibility. They also eat up, I think, a bit of this extra space that was here. One thing that's kind of cool about the dial, the gray here is a little bit high-panned, so it actually is a little bit higher here, and then it curves down to that outer edge area. It gives it just a little bit more three-dimensionality, just something else when you kind of move it around that catches light. At 4.5, there is a date window here, which is getting blocked slightly. Move that. And that shows a black date on a white date wheel. This is a little bit obtrusive. I do kind of wish that wasn't there, or if perhaps it was at a different location. I know, I guess, if they put it at 3, they would have had to truncate that marker, so I assume they didn't want to do that. But it is just a little bit floating. I would have liked to see, or just have the option perhaps for a date-free model. Lastly, looking at the hands on this watch, you have these big, beautiful, shining Dauphine-style hour and minute hands. They look really great. They match with the markers really well. And they also have these really long tritium tubes on them. And then the second hand here is a simple, thin stick second hand. But as you can see, it has this interesting detail of a counterweight that has this double R, like railroad signature, which has a really cool kind of a Baroque look to it. And once again, obviously just ties back to the history of the brand. Once again, now they're just talking about the tritium. There are 15 tritium tubes in here. It is T25 tritium. They glow, everything but 12 in the hands are green, and then the hands and the 12 are orange. The tritium is extremely cool. It's not really super bright like super luminova right after you charge it, but it is a very consistent glow. So if you're out in a movie, if you're at a dark bar, you'll see it really, really well. And I think it actually, as I've worn this watch, I've become to prefer it over super luminova. On the wrist, the Ball Fireman Racer Classic wears really well. Like I said, it's a bit larger than you expect from a watch this style, but I think they were going for something a little bit more robust and a little bit more sporty that happens to have these kind of refined and somewhat vintage, early 20th century looks to it. So, and I think they achieved that quite nicely, because I wore this watch quite a lot, actually, and I felt very comfortable wearing it with more casual clothing and just as kind of a daily wear watch. And also with the tritium tubes, it's very, very convenient no matter what situation you're in. Either you're in bright light and you have no trouble seeing it, or those tritium tubes really pop out and you can just, immediately read the time. It's really, a very, very cool and very, very versatile thing to have in your watch. The look itself, then, I think it's really handsome. Like I said, it's a bit like smoky and dark, which I really like. I think that makes it an interesting watch to pair with clothing, because it just, I don't know, adds some level of sophistication to things. It's very refined, very kind of gentlemanly. Just a really, really nice look to it. And overall, though, it's not a very loud watch. I think it's quite subtle, despite the fact that there's a lot going on in the case, and I think a decent amount going on in the dial as well. The watch, there's two options for the watch, bracelet or this crocodile strap. I think this is a beautiful option for the watch. It does have 21 millimeter lugs, which is a bit inconvenient. Obviously, if you want to switch straps, you could easily squeeze a 22 millimeter strap in there, but it's harder to find a 21 millimeter. Not impossible, just harder. The strap that comes with, beautiful strap, crocodile leather, as I said. It has this kind of nice tobacco, dark brown color that I think it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little more faded or something. It's a little less showy than other crocodile straps I've seen, and I think that works really, really well with the smoky gray in the dial, just for a very handsome combination there. One really cool thing I love is the ball buckle. So it has kind of the look of a roller buckle with screw details on either side. It's not actually like a roller piece here, but the look is just really nice, and it definitely, once again, just ties into the history of brand, everything, and just really good detailing. To wrap up, I think the Ball Fireman Racer Classic is a really, really cool watch that, frankly, was just really enjoyable to wear. Stylistically, aesthetically, I think it really hits the mark. The only visual thing that I didn't love about it was the date placement. It just kind of breaks up this otherwise very, very attractive, dark, handsome dial. Maybe if it had been an inverse color or a dark gray to match it, it would have been a little less obtrusive, but as white, just stands out a bit too much. The finishing on the case, the strap, just really also just beautiful, really make for a very enjoyable watch to look at, very enjoyable watch to wear. And moreover, this watch kind of won me for, won tritium tubes for me. And I know tritium tubes are available in some very affordable brands. Tracer, Luminox, things like that. But there isn't one that makes a watch that is, quite so attractive and kind of handsome and masculine. They're always very sporty watches, very military inspired. But I really like that they are used here for a different purpose. The watch does cost a fairly steep price at $1,699. That is the MSRP, so it might be able to find it for a little bit less than that. And at that price, it might be a little bit of a tough sell with the movement that's in there, which is essentially an ETA 2824. I do know it's a very enjoyable watch to wear, so whether or not that's in your budget is really up for you. I would love to see a watch by them in like around the $1,000, $1,200 range, but they don't have that offering quite yet. Regardless, this watch is very satisfying, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more Ball watches in the future, some of their chronographs, their super overbuilt dive watches, things like that. So please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Thank you.